Life does not move by speed alone. Life moves by alignment, timing, and spiritual authorization. Tonight, we are not gathered because we lack sleep. We are gathered because we understand seasons. A new month is not just a change on the calendar. It is a spiritual corridor. It is a gate in time, and every gate must be approached with intelligence. Scripture reveals a mystery. At midnight there was a cry. Midnight is not an accident, it is a strategy. Midnight is whence prison doors open, covenants are enforced, evil verdicts are overturned, and divine instructions are released. While others are sleeping, destiny is awake tonight. Listen to me. If you enter a month casually, you will manage problems prophetically assigned to careless people. But when a man stands on the altar of prayer, he announces to the heavens, I refuse to be a victim of time. Prayer is not begging God. Prayer is standing in your jurisdiction and declaring what is legal and what is illegal. Tonight, we are not praying because God is deaf. We are praying because authority must be exercised. Every month comes with opportunities, battles, helpers, decisions, and only prayer decides which one dominates. Come, hear this truth and never forget it. What you do spiritually in advance, life obeys naturally. This is why we pray at midnight, because before the sun rises, verdicts are already written. Tonight, we are aligning our minds with divine wisdom, our steps with divine order, our hands with divine productivity. We are shutting doors that must not open. We are opening doors no man can shut. Some months fail people not because of demons, but because of ignorance of spiritual protocol. But tonight, by prayer, by sacrifice, by discernment, we take charge. We declare, this month will not waste us. This month will not confuse us. This month will not bury our efforts. We speak life into days not yet lived. We speak favor into meetings not yet scheduled. We speak victory into battles not yet seen. Tonight, come, while the world sleeps, we legislate, and when the sun rises, life will respond to what was settled at midnight. Lift your voice. The altar is open. The month is listening. P-R-A-Y. Spiritual timing is the understanding that life is not only controlled by effort, sincerity, or passion, but by alignment with divine seasons. There are moments in destiny when the same prayer carries more weight than it did yesterday. Come, when the same action produces greater results, simply because it is done at the right time. Come, many people fail not because they are lazy or prayerless, but because they act outside of their appointed season. A time in the spirit is not neutral, it is charged. Every moment carries an assignment. Come, and wisdom is knowing what heaven expects from you in that moment. A new month represents more than the turning of dates. It is a transition point in the spirit realm. Time moves in cycles, and at the beginning of every cycle, spiritual permissions are renewed, altered, or withdrawn, just as physical laws recognize beginnings and endings. Spiritual laws respond strongly to transitions. This is why Scripture repeatedly emphasizes the beginning, because what is established at the start often determines the outcome. When people wait until problems appear before they pray, come, they are responding late to issues that were already programmed at the gate of time. Come, spiritual timing teaches that destiny is not only about where you are going, but when you move. A door opened too early can destroy you, and a door opened too late can cause unnecessary delay. Come, there are blessings that become burdens when received outside of time, and there are battles that only become dangerous because they were confronted at the wrong moment. Heaven operates with precision, and spiritual men learn to read the clock of God. Midnight prayer is not emotional enthusiasm, it is intelligence. It is a recognition that certain transactions are easier to enforce before the day speaks. Time itself can speak. Days can carry favor or resistance. Scripture reveals that certain days were oval, not because of human behavior alone, but because of the spiritual activities assigned to them. When a person ignores spiritual timing, they may be sincere yet constantly tired, productive yet unfulfilled, active yet ineffective. They are rowing hard but against the tide. Understanding timing allows a believer to cooperate with divine flow instead of struggling against invisible currents. The beginning of a month is a spiritual blank page, but it is not empty. Their forces are already negotiating outcomes before humans wake up to the reality of the new season. Altars compete at the gate of time. Words are spoken, permissions are sought, and agendas are proposed. Those who show up spiritually early gain the advantage of influence. Prayer at the start of a month is a declaration that you refuse to be a passive recipient of whatever the season brings. It is an insistence on partnership rather than surprise. Spiritual timing also explains why repeated prayers sometimes suddenly produce results. It is not that God finally decided to answer, but that the appointed time arrived. Heaven works with set times, and prayer aligns the human heart with divine calendars. When people pray with understanding, they are not trying to convince God, they are positioning themselves to receive what is already scheduled. This is why delay is not always denial, and speed is not always approval. Timing determines the difference. Midnight represents a boundary between what was and what is coming. There is a thin line where authority can be exercised before momentum builds. Once a day gathers speed, it becomes harder to redirect outcomes. Midnight prayer recognizes that it is easier to shape a day before it speaks than to correct it after it has spoken. Those who understand this do not wait for daylight to react. They legislate in the quiet hours when resistance is minimal and spiritual sensitivity is high. Many spiritual casualties are victims of mistimed actions. Some spoke too early, some moved too late. Some rested when they should have contended, and some contended when they should have waited. Spiritual timing brings discernment, patience, and boldness in the correct measure. It teaches when to be silent and when to cry aloud, when to sow and when to harvest, when to confront and when to withdraw. The power of spiritual timing is ultimately the power of agreement with heaven's schedule. It is recognizing that God is never late, but he is rarely rushed. Those who honor timing do not panic when things delay, and they do not become careless when things accelerate. They remain sensitive, watching, listening, praying, understanding that every new month is not just time passing, but destiny calling, seasons shifting, and spiritual laws waiting for someone who knows how to stand at the gate and respond accordingly. Midnight is not merely a point on the clock, it is a spiritual intersection where transitions occur quietly but decisively. It is the moment when one day hands over authority to another, when what has been legally permitted in the previous cycle expires and new permissions begin to operate. In the realm of the spirit, boundaries matter, and midnight represents one of the most sensitive boundaries in time. That sensitivity makes it a moment of heightened activity, where outcomes can be shaped with less resistance than during the noise of the day. Throughout scripture and spiritual experience, midnight appears as a moment when the unseen realm is unusually active. It is not because darkness itself holds power, but because human activity reduces and spiritual awareness increases. When the physical world sleeps, the spirit world does not. Many spiritual operations prefer secrecy, silence, calm, and stillness, and midnight provides that environment. This is why decisive encounters often happen when distractions are minimal and the soul is more receptive. The mind is less cluttered and the spirit becomes more dominant. Midnight is strategic because it is a point of reset. What failed to work out during the day can be redressed before the next cycle fully takes shape. It is a moment where cause can still alter effect. Once the morning arrives, patterns have already begun to solidify. Decisions, meetings, movements, and reactions will flow according to what has been permitted in the early hours. Prayer at midnight is not reactionary, it is preventative. It seeks to influence outcomes before they become visible realities. The silence of midnight creates an atmosphere where spiritual sensitivity is heightened. Many people struggle to hear clearly during the day because of emotional noise, mental clutter, and external demands. At midnight, the body is quiet, the environment is calm, and the soul is more exposed. This makes it easier to perceive spiritual impressions, warnings, instructions, and confirmations. It is a time when discernment sharpens, not because God speaks louder, but because competing voices grow quieter. Midnight also represents vulnerability. Just as people are physically less guarded while asleep, spiritual defenses can be weaker when awareness is low. This is one reason negative spiritual activities often target the night hours. It is not superstition, it is strategy. When a believer chooses to be awake at midnight in prayer, they are deliberately refusing vulnerability. They are standing guard at a time when many are unaware. This posture shifts the balance of power, turning a moment of potential exposure into a moment of authority. Another reason midnight is strategic is that it operates before momentum builds. Once a day gains speed, it becomes harder to change its direction. Words spoken early carry more influence than words spoken late. The decisions made at the start of a cycle often determine the tone of everything that follows. Midnight prayer recognizes this principle and acts on it. Instead of spending the day reacting to pressure, the praying person sets the tone in advance. Life then responds to what has already been settled. There is also a legal dimension to midnight. Spiritual systems operate on laws, permissions, and timing. Certain verdicts are easier to overturn at transition points. When one period ends and another begins, previous authorizations can be challenged. This is why midnight prayer often carries a sense of urgency and intensity. It is not emotional drama, it is legal awareness. The praying individual understands that timing affects authority and that some things must be addressed before they harden into patterns. Midnight prayer demands sacrifice, and that sacrifice itself produces spiritual weight. Giving up sleep is not about impressing God. It is about valuing outcomes over comfort. In the spirit realm, sacrifice amplifies seriousness. It communicates that the matter at hand is important enough to cost something. This depth of engagement often produces clarity, focus, and endurance in prayer, qualities that are harder to sustain during casual moments. Midnight is also symbolic of transition from obscurity to manifestation. What is prayed in darkness often appears in daylight. Seeds are planted when no one is watching, but they grow into visible results. that this principle explains why people who consistently pray at midnight often experience sudden breakthroughs that seem unexplained to observers. The work was done quietly at a time when results were still negotiable. Understanding midnight as a strategic hour changes how a believer relates to time. It removes passivity and replaces it with intentionality. Instead of drifting into a new day unprepared, the praying person enters it with spiritual advantage. They are not guessing what will happen. They have already spoken into it, resisted what needed resistance, and aligned themselves with what needed alignment. In this way, midnight becomes not a time of fear or superstition, but a moment of authority, awareness, and deliberate partnership with spiritual law. Prayer as legal authority begins with the understanding that the spiritual realm is governed by laws, not impulses. God does not rule the universe by emotions or emergencies. He rules by principles, order, and jurisdiction. This means that prayer is not meant to be an act of desperation, but an act of alignment with established spiritual laws. When people see prayer only as crying, begging, or repeating words, they miss its deeper function. Prayer is a platform where authority is exercised, permissions are activated, and limitations are enforced. In any legal system, outcomes are not decided by who shouts the loudest, but by who understands the law and stands in the right position to invoke it. In the same way, prayer operates effectively when a person understands their spiritual standing and the legal grounds on which they are praying. Authority in prayer is rooted in relationship, righteousness, and alignment with divine will. It is not arrogance. It is responsibility. When someone prays from legal authority, they are not asking God to do what He has already empowered them to represent. Spiritual authority functions through delegation. Heaven releases authority to men and expects them to enforce it on earth. This is why prayer is necessary, not because God lacks power, but because authority must be exercised through human agency. Prayer becomes the means by which heaven's verdicts are declared, enforced, and made visible in the physical realm. Without prayer, many things remain legally permitted, even if they are not divinely desired, simply because no one has stood to challenge them. Prayer as legal authority also explains why silence can be dangerous. In law, what is not challenged is often assumed to be accepted. In the spirit, unanswered resistance can become permission. When believers fail to pray, they are not being neutral, they are surrendering influence. Prayer is the act of standing up to say, this is not permitted, or this is authorized. It is not emotional noise. It is a formal presentation before the spiritual system that governs outcomes. This legal dimension of prayer requires knowledge. Ignorance weakens authority. A person may be sincere, but sincerity without understanding produces inconsistent results. Legal prayer is built on truth, not assumptions. That it draws strength from divine promises, spiritual principles, and revealed will. This is why effective prayer is often specific rather than vague. Specificity reflects legal clarity. General prayer may express desire, but precise prayer enforces authority. Prayer as legal authority also operates through words. In both spiritual and legal systems, words establish realities. Spoken declarations are not mere sounds. They are instruments of enforcement. This is why prayer is often vocal rather than silent. Speaking is an act of jurisdiction. It announces presence, intention, and command. When words are spoken in alignment with divine authority, they do not return empty because they carry legal backing. Another aspect of legal authority in prayer is timing. Even valid authority can fade if exercised at the wrong time. Courts operate on schedules, and so does the spirit realm. Certain matters are easier to address at specific moments. This is why prayer tied to seasons, transitions, and beginnings carries unusual effectiveness. At these moments, permissions are being reviewed. And outcomes are still flexible. Praying at such times is not superstition, it is legal intelligence. Prayer as legal authority also involves consistency. One appearance in court rarely settles a complex case. Repeated appearances reinforce seriousness and persistence. This does not mean God is reluctant. It means spiritual resistance often requires sustained enforcement. Persistent prayer is not begging, that it is staying present until the matter is resolved. Authority is maintained through endurance, not impatience. There is also accountability in legal prayer. Authority cannot be exercised casually. Those who pray as legislators must live as representatives. Character strengthens authority, while compromise weakens it. This is not punishment, it is alignment. Authority flows best through vessels that are consistent with the values of the system they represent. When prayer and lifestyle contradict each other, authority leaks. Understanding prayer as legal authority transforms how a believer approaches challenges. Instead of panic, there is posture. Instead of fear, there is clarity. Instead of confusion, there is strategy. Problems are no longer seen as proof of failure, but as cases requiring enforcement. Prayer becomes deliberate, informed, calm, and confident. The believer no longer asks whether prayer works, but how to apply it correctly, standing in position, understanding jurisdiction, speaking with clarity, enforcing what is permitted, resisting what is illegal, and occupying the space between heaven's will and earth's reality where authority must be exercised. Alignment before advancement is the principle that movement without order produces exhaustion, while movement with order produces progress. Many people desire growth, promotion, expansion, and visibility, yet overlook the internal and spiritual positioning required to sustain those outcomes. Advancement is not merely about speed or opportunity, it is about readiness. Without alignment, their progress can become pressure, and increase can turn into instability. Alignment ensures that when advancement comes, it builds rather than breaks. Alignment begins within the individual. The spirit, soul, and body must be in agreement. When a person is internally divided, advancement amplifies confusion. Prayer brings alignment by quieting competing voices and restoring order within. It helps clarify motives, refine desires, and synchronize intention with purpose. Many delays in life are not caused by opposition, but by misalignment. Heaven often withholds advancement until alignment is restored, not as punishment, but as protection. Spiritual alignment also involves positioning under divine authority. Advancement without covering often leads to exposure. Just as systems function best when connected to a source, individuals function best when aligned with divine direction. Prayer recalibrates a person's sense of direction. It realigns ambitions with assignment. Some goals look attractive, but are outside of one's jurisdiction. Prayer helps distinguish between what is good and what is authorized. Advancement outside of authorization may bring temporary success, but it rarely brings peace or longevity. Alignment before advancement also applies to timing. Moving ahead of time can be as dangerous as moving too late. Prayer sharpens sensitivity to divine timing, helping a person know when to wait and when to act. Come. Many people push for doors to open without discerning whether the season supports that opening. Alignment teaches patience. Come, not as passivity, but as wisdom. It is better to wait in alignment than to rush into confusion. Another dimension of alignment is values. Advancement tests character more than struggle does. When values are unclear, success exposes inconsistencies. Prayer aligns values with divine standards, ensuring that when opportunities arise, decisions are made from conviction rather than pressure. This alignment produces stability under growth. Without it, advancement can corrupt, distract, or derail. Many people lose themselves in the very things they prayed for because their inner alignment was never addressed. Alignment also involves relationships. Advancement often brings new environments, new associations, and new responsibilities. Prayer helps discern which relationships to carry forward and which to release. Misaligned relationships can sabotage progress. Being aligned does not mean being isolated, but being connected correctly. Prayer refines discernment so that helpers are recognized and distractions are identified early. Advancement without relational alignment often leads to conflict and burnout. Purpose alignment is another critical aspect. Advancement should move a person closer to their assignment, not further from it. Prayer helps clarify purpose beyond ambition. It reveals why growth is needed and how it should be stewarded. When purpose is unclear, advancement becomes aimless. Activity increases, but impact decreases. Alignment ensures that progress has direction and meaning. Alignment before advancement also protects from pride. When growth happens without grounding, ego replaces dependence. Prayer maintains humility by reminding the individual of the source of advancement. It keeps success from becoming self-reliance. Humility sustains advancement longer than talent ever could. Prayerful alignment preserves gratitude, teachability, and awareness, qualities that keep doors open. Misalignment often manifests as restlessness, confusion, and constant dissatisfaction, even in progress. A person may be advancing outwardly while deteriorating inwardly. Prayer addresses this by restoring coherence between inner life and external movement. It brings peace that confirms correctness. Advancement in alignment feels weighty, but not chaotic, demanding, but not destructive. Ultimately, alignment before advancement reflects divine order. Heaven values structure over speed. Growth that is aligned is sustainable, impactful, and fulfilling. Prayer becomes the tool by which alignment is continually assessed and maintained. It keeps the individual sensitive, grounded, and responsive. When alignment is in place, advancement does not have to be forced. Doors open naturally. Opportunities arrive appropriately, and increase becomes a blessing rather than a burden. Advancement then becomes not a struggle for position, but a response to readiness, where movement flows from order, and progress reflects purpose rather than pressure. The sacrifice of sleep for spiritual dominance is rooted in the understanding that every realm is governed by value exchange. Nothing of weight is gained without cost, and in spiritual matters, convenience is often the currency that must be surrendered. Sleep represents comfort, rest, and physical preservation, all of which are legitimate needs. Yet there are moments when yielding comfort becomes a statement of priority. When a person willingly sacrifices sleep to pray, they are declaring that spiritual outcomes matter more than temporary ease. Spiritual dominance is not about control over people, but mastery over atmosphere, influence over outcomes, and authority in unseen realms. Such dominance is never accidental. It is cultivated through intentional engagement, and night hours provide a unique environment for that engagement. When sleep is sacrificed, the body is silenced and the spirit is given room to lead. This shift of dominance from flesh to spirit is significant. The body prefers rest, but the spirit thrives on attention. Choosing prayer over sleep trains the inner man to rule rather than submit to physical appetite. There is also a principle of seriousness attached to sacrifice. In every system, what costs nothing is treated lightly. When sleep is sacrificed, prayer gains depth, focus, and gravity. It moves beyond routine into deliberate engagement. The person praying is not multitasking or fitting God into leftover time. They are offering prime time. This depth often produces clarity that casual prayer cannot sustain. The mind becomes alert in a different way, attentive not because of energy, but because of intention. Sacrificing sleep sharpens discipline. A spiritual dominance requires consistency, and discipline is the bridge between desire and authority. Night prayer builds resilience in the inner life. It trains endurance, patience, and self-governance. A person who can command their body to wake when it wants to sleep has begun to understand rulership. That this inner rulership translates outwardly into stability, focus, and authority in other areas of life. There is also an element of separation in the sacrifice of sleep. While the world rests, the praying individual stands apart. This separation is not superiority, but positioning. Many spiritual operations, both positive and negative, are intensified at night because fewer people are spiritually alert. By being awake, the praying person refuses passivity. They occupy a watchman role, choosing awareness over vulnerability. This posture alone alters spiritual dynamics, turning a time of exposure into a time of strength. Sacrifice of sleep also reflects hunger. Hunger attracts supply. When a person is willing to lose rest to gain insight or direction or intervention, it communicates desire beyond words. This hunger produces sensitivity. The spirit becomes more receptive, more aware of subtle impressions. Many insights, instructions, and breakthroughs occur during moments of physical weakness because the spirit is no longer competing with the flesh for attention. Spiritual dominance is closely tied to preparation. Battles are rarely won in the moment they appear. They are won in advance. Night prayer is preparatory. It deals with matters before they surface visibly. Sacrificing sleep to pray is often the reason certain crises never manifest. What others call luck is frequently the result of unseen labor done when no one was watching. There is also a strengthening that comes through sacrifice. When prayer continues despite fatigue, it moves from emotion into conviction. Feelings fluctuate, but conviction sustains. That this depth of engagement builds authority because it is rooted in commitment rather than excitement. Authority gained through sacrifice is durable. It does not collapse under pressure because it was forged under cost. Sacrificing sleep must be guided by wisdom, not compulsion. It is not about constant deprivation, but strategic offering. The value lies not in exhaustion, but in intention. When done with understanding, the sacrifice does not weaken. It strengthens. The body may feel tired, but the spirit becomes sharp. Over time, this pattern produces a believer who is alert, discerning, and influential. That the sacrifice of sleep also confronts self-centeredness. It shifts focus from immediate personal comfort to long-term spiritual outcomes. This shift matures the inner life. It produces patience, foresight, and responsibility. Spiritual dominance grows where self denial is practiced willingly. Ultimately, sacrificing sleep for prayer is a declaration of priority, discipline, hunger, and readiness. It is choosing eternal impact over temporary rest, awareness over convenience, and authority over passivity. Those who consistently make this sacrifice find that life responds differently to them. Come, not because they are stronger physically, but because they have learned how to place the Spirit in command and maintain that posture even when comfort demands surrender. Speaking into the month before it speaks to you is the understanding that time is not silent and seasons are not passive. Every month carries an agenda, and if that agenda is not confronted, influenced, or redirected, it will express itself regardless of human intention. Time responds to voices, not wishes. Silence at the beginning of a season is not humility, it is surrender. When a person fails to speak deliberately, their circumstances are permitted to speak first, often louder and with greater force. Words are not merely descriptive, they are creative and legislative. In the spiritual realm, words establish boundaries, authorize outcomes, and define expectations. When a new month begins, it is still fluid. Its days have not yet hardened into patterns. This fluidity makes it vulnerable to influence. Speaking early is an act of authority that takes advantage of this vulnerability. It is easier to define an empty space than to correct a filled one. Once experiences accumulate, resistance increases, but at the start, direction can still be set with relative ease. The reason many people feel ambushed by their months is not always because of spiritual opposition, but because of spiritual silence. They enter seasons without declaring anything, expecting neutrality. But neutrality does not exist in the spirit. If you do not define the season will define you. Circumstances, people pressures, and random events will begin to assign meaning, direction, and limitation. Speaking into the month is the refusal to allow randomness to rule. Speaking is an act of ownership. You do not speak over what you do not believe you have authority over. When a believer speaks intentionally at the beginning of a month, they are acknowledging responsibility. They are saying, I recognize this season as mine to steward. The stewardship requires direction, just as land left unattended grows weeds. Time left unattended grows chaos. Words function as cultivation tools, shaping what will grow and what will be restricted. There is also a prophetic dimension to speaking into the month. Prophecy is not always prediction. It is often alignment. Speaking what should be rather than reacting to what is positions a person ahead of events. It shifts posture from defense to leadership. When challenges arise, they are met as deviations, not surprises. The person who spoke early already has a reference point, a declared standard against which everything else is measured. Months often speak through patterns, repeated frustrations, recurring delays. Familiar disappointments are ways time expresses itself when left unchallenged. Speaking into the month interrupts repetition. It introduces intentionality where habit once ruled. Patterns lose power when confronted early. This is why many cycles break, not after struggle, but after clarity and declaration. Speaking into the month also aligns the inner life. Words spoken outwardly reinforce convictions inwardly. Fear loses grip when faith is verbalized. Confusion weakens when clarity is declared. The speaker becomes the first listener. This internal alignment strengthens discernment throughout the month. Decisions are made from a declared framework rather than emotional reaction. There is a difference between complaining about a month and commanding it. Complaining gives the month authority. Commanding takes authority from it. Many people speak only after the damage has occurred. At that point, words become repairs rather than designs. Early speech is architectural. It lays foundations instead of fixing cracks. This approach does not deny challenges, but it defines how challenges will be handled before they appear. Speaking early also establishes expectation. Expectation influences perception. When expectation is positive and intentional, opportunities are recognized more quickly. Then distractions are identified more easily. The mind becomes trained to look for alignment rather than threat. This does not eliminate difficulty, but it changes interpretation. What might have discouraged becomes instructional. Come. What might have delayed becomes directional. Silence at the start of a month often produces anxiety later. The unknown feels heavier when it was never addressed. Come. Speaking into the month reduces uncertainty by replacing it with intentional vision. Even when outcomes differ, come. The speaker remains grounded because they approach the season consciously rather than casually. Speaking into the month is not about control, but about cooperation with spiritual law. Time responds to authority, not panic. Words spoken in faith, clarity, and understanding shape atmosphere. They do not force outcomes, but they influence conditions under which outcomes emerge. Those who speak early do not eliminate opposition, but they reduce its shock and increase their readiness. When a person consistently speaks into seasons before they unfold, life stops feeling random. Patterns become visible, lessons become clearer, and progress becomes intentional. Time ceases to be an enemy or a mystery and begins to function as a partner that responds to direction, expectation, and authority exercise before momentum takes over and voices other than yours begin to define what the season will become. In summary, this entire teaching calls us to approach time, prayer, and destiny with understanding rather than emotion. A new month is not something to endure, but something to govern. Spiritual timing teaches us when to act. Midnight prayer teaches us where battles are decided. Prayer as legal authority teaches us how outcomes are enforced. Alignment before advancement teaches us why preparation matters. The sacrifice of sleep teaches us the value of spiritual seriousness. And speaking into the month teaches us the power of intentional declaration. When these principles are embraced together, prayer stops being routine and becomes strategy. We no longer react to life, we shape it. We enter seasons with clarity instead of confusion, authority instead of fear, and expectation instead of anxiety. Time responds to those who understand its gates. Heaven partners with those who honor its laws. And life begins to reflect what was settled in the place of prayer before the month ever had a chance to speak.